5 or 6 years ago, we had a gentleman here talking to us about the use of essential oils. As a result of that, hundreds, maybe thousands of people, and of course all over the country, are using them to some extent or other. Now we have found that there's more to it than that, and the next lady, Cathy Eaton, the other half of the very talented Eaton family, is here to help share a lot of that with us. Will you welcome Cathy with us this morning?
Thank you. I don't think I need this one. Actually, my husband could have spoke longer because I really appreciated what he was speaking about, and he has been a great motivator in my life as well. Just like my friend Jeannie Sternberg, who's in the back there. I don't know if many of you know her, but she's a real motivator and a wonderful person. But I really, first of all, wanted to thank all of you for coming to this, and for Dean, all the people that are participating with Global Sciences, because I have a favorite quote. And that quote is by Albert Einstein. And it goes like this: "Great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds." So when you're here and you're presenting your material, or you're a person that's attending Global Sciences and someone says to you in the hall, "What are they talking about?" and you give them a little mention and they walk the other direction, don't worry about it. If Albert Einstein understood that people understood many different things, then just go right ahead. Okay, first of all, a little bit about myself. How in the world did I ever end up using essential oils, studying them in the medical and clinical aromatherapy arena, when I didn't really think that they held a glass of water? I felt that essential oils were hokey pokey. Well, what happened was, originally, I had a major in health and physical education, and my master's degree was in research exercise physiology. And I worked for the Olympic Committee as an exercise physiologist for their outreach program and sports medicine, athletic training, specifically for figure skating. Well, in the process, I was also teaching at a high school for 15 years, which was an experience in itself. I absolutely loved it. And what happened was, a year before I skated in world figure skating, I came down with cervical cancer. And that was a real wake-up call to me, because I thought I really had everything going. I felt good, I thought I looked good, everything was wonderful. And I didn't even understand how I manifested it to begin with when I thought I felt so good. But to make a long story short, what I really realized was I did manifest it. I did draw it to myself. I was married to a different man at that time, and as soon as I came out of the hospital, actually I was still in the hospital, I had this peak experience of realizing that I must have drawn it to myself and put it down in this region, because that was the end of the relationship. And I didn't know at one level or another that he was having an affair. So what did I do? I got up and I walked out of the hospital when I wasn't allowed to. And I went home, had my girlfriend pick me up, and I drug out 2 garbage cans, and I took a mile walk around the block when everybody thought I was insane. And my neighbors were all upset. They thought, "Oh, poor girl, she's dying of cancer. She must be losing her mind." And the next day I went back to school. And I had 30 days leave of absence from Princeton High School. And I walked right into the principal's office and I said, "Listen, I developed this dis-easement and I've gotten rid of it. There's no problem here." He said, "You know, you can't come back in and teach. You need 30 days off." I said, "I want you to realize something. I've changed my mind. There's nobody in this body but me, and I've changed my mind." And they said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Why can't I do that?" And they gave no answer. So after 4 hours of sitting in the principal's office like a bad little child, they finally sent the sub home, and I went about and told my students what happened. Well, that's eventually what led me into the arena of holistic health. I never knew whether I wanted to be a medical doctor, or a dancer, so I ended up working in some hospitals and switched over and went into ballet. And from that point on, I kept moving in the physical education field in physiology. But in the process, I studied a lot of things, everything from iridology and colon therapy and psychotherapy and spiritual response therapy, and eventually essential oils. And what I realized is it's a huge ball game. The more I went to the different countries and studied from the different doctors, whether it was Dr. Lapraz, Dr. Danielle Penuel, Dr. Pierre Francombe, the whole French arena there, or Bruce Bukowski, Dr. Bukowski, in anthroposophic medicine, homeopathy, and essential oils, which is really fascinating too. What I found out is the more I know I don't know. And I kept studying and studying and studying and going, this is just absolutely amazing. We've had them around over 6,000 years. Everybody probably knows the story from Iraq to Egypt and to the Greeks and to the Romans using essential oils in history. Why did the Egyptian even use essential oils? Why did they hold the ankh up to the nose for life, just like they always held the lotus up to the nose? How many of you have been to Egypt? Did you see in the hieroglyphics they're always holding the ankh or the lotus up to the nose? And that's because the Egyptians believed that life came through olfaction, that up through the neurotransmitters and up to the pineal gland to be stimulated through essential oils so that they could be open to spiritual awareness. And they did use them in the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual arenas. They had different temples. In Dendara, the females worked with the essential oils. In Edfu, it was the men. In Komombo, the men and the women worked with surgery processes and essential oils. So why is it that they worked with them all those thousands of years ago and they were never really brought back into the medical arena? Well, it got lost for a while, and then the French basically brought it back. Gattefossé brought it back as far as the medical arena and categorizing oils for their chemotypes, etc., because of being burned and using lavender. Most people know that story. But most aromatherapy terminology has been based off of the perfume industry, which is great, but it's something totally different than what we're doing with essential oils right now. Totally different. We're actually in the middle of an environmental fragrancing mode where there's billions, literally, of dollars spent in many countries, especially the United States, and the Flavor and Fragrance Foundation, to take essential oils, make them synthetic, and be able to use them for brain control, of which I'll show you later on. Using them at subliminal levels. They plan on putting them in the New York subway. There's been a big argument about that. It hasn't gone through yet, to be able to sedate people so that supposedly there isn't aggressive activity happening in the New York subway. They've used essential oils, not the therapeutic grade oils or even the oils, but they take the chemical constituents and make them synthetic, which we'll learn about in a minute. They have you buy certain things. They use them in stores. And these are not just hearsay. There's research, there's documentation. I can give it to you later where they're doing these things. Now, I love fragrance and I believe in essential oils, but if we're not aware of it, I don't believe in that. All right. So there's many things going on with them. And today we're going to talk about the triad of aromatherapy, the international triad, with the French using them internal, the British and American people using them topical, English-speaking people, and the Germans using essential oils through olfaction. Because we know that through scent, through olfaction, it's 10,000 times greater than taste, and up to 100,000 times greater than all the senses combined. That's how strong olfaction is. Well, what is an essential oil to begin with? I'm sure you've heard everybody say, oh, it's the blood of the plant. Okay, it is the blood of the plant in a way. An essential oil is the essence of the plant, which it is, because it also maintains its spirituality as well as its chemistry. But according to Dr. Kurt Schnabel, an essential oil is the byproduct of the plant's metabolism. And do you know that there's only 20% of plants that are producing essential oils? They don't come from every single plant. And out of that 20%, there's only 5% that's being used for aromatherapy. Quote, what people think aromatherapy really is. But out of that, it's probably 1% being used actual in true aromatherapy as opposed to environmental fragrancing. Well, essential oils have a lot of properties to them. First of all, you can get them out of the root, the stem, the leaf, the bark. Some of them are taken out of the whole plant. You look at an orange tree, you get citrus bergamia, you get orange oil right out of the peel. You get petitgrain from the leaf. What do you get out of the petals? Does anyone know? Neroli. Wonderful aphrodisiac-like properties of neroli. Sedating, calming, used as an antidepressant clinically over in France and Great Britain. So one plant can make 3 totally different oils with totally different chemical chemotypes and constituents. All right, properties are really critical. They're antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, antiseptic. They're immune stimulating. They have immune stimulating properties. They have precursors to amino acids and hormone-like properties, such as clary sage has esterol. And they're able to link in, just like the piece of a puzzle, with these certain receptors off the cell sites. How many of you have ever read Candace Pert's book, Molecules of Emotion? Is that not a wonderful book? She documented the opiate receptor in the body, and we're going to get into the relationship of receptors and how the essential oils hook in through olfaction and through putting them topically on, and get into the blood and the lymphatic system. Now, essential oils have different grades to begin with. The majority of what's used in the United States, what do you think it is? Food grade and perfume grade. What you use in aromatherapy is totally opposite. It's therapeutic grade oils and floral waters, which are the byproduct of the distillation of the essential oil. So, let me just write on this. You have, can you even see that? You have therapeutic grade, perfume grade, we'll put food grade in between here, food grade, and then floral waters. Therapeutic grade is the only grade that you should be using in aromatherapy, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Food grade is what most of you are taking in every day, whether they're in teas, they're put in foods, they're put in tobacco, in all different aspects of, even some people are using them in clothing now. As a matter of fact, they're taking certain essential oils of which they're making synthetic, I don't know if you knew this, through brain research, and they're actually putting them on bills, like late payment bills, sending them out to people to get them to become more aggressive to pay a bill. I mean, they're trying all kinds of things like this. There's much of this research going on. Okay, so the food grade is pretty self-explanatory. The FDA says, oh yeah, you can take this internally. That's okay. They were saying you can't take therapeutic grade oils internally. It was against the law. Well, now they have a certification out called GRAS. Have you heard of that? G-R-A-S, which means that they're generally recommended as safe. So I looked at their list and I thought, man, the FDA doesn't have a clue what they're doing when it comes to this. I looked at this and I saw jasmine on there. Do you know what jasmine is? Jasmine is not considered an essential oil. Anything that's distilled, where you take the plants and you put them on and you steam distill them and you get an essential oil, that's what they consider an essential oil. But an absolute is an oil that's been chemically extracted because it's so fragile, like the jasmine, that if you distilled it, you destroy it. And so jasmine is an absolute, and they use petrol ether, and they use different solvents and these toxic chemicals at first to extract it, and then they turn around and they do it again with an alcohol process. But you can never get out the chemicals completely. It's not harmful to the body. But in clinical aromatherapy and Real Aromatherapy International, you would never hear anybody say that you take an absolute oil, which jasmine is one, internal. So I wonder, is anybody here from the FDA? Because I'd really like to talk to you about what you're doing here in the essential oil arena. This, to me, is a big mistake. You don't want to do that. And essential oils also are flammable, so you do want to keep them away from the flames. Some people will burn them with candles, of which you just get a little of the phenylpropane smell. You don't really get any of the therapeutic value that way, because oftentimes when you add heat, you're destroying that. Okay. So perfume grade is what you get most of the time when you're in a health food store. And those have usually been cut with vegetable oils and alcohols, turpentine, etc., because that way they make more money. And then floral waters are the byproduct of the distillation process. Let me show you something quickly. When essential oils are distilled so that you can get the proper properties out of them so that they're complete, it has to be done in a specific manner. Okay, here you see water and fire. and then the steam going up into the essential oils. It says vaporized water and essential oils. Essential oils are predominantly fat soluble. That's why when people are running around telling you, put essential oils in water and drink them down, they're going to go right into your mucous membranes, and eventually they're going to build up, and they can strip mucous membranes. So they're predominantly fat soluble. What happens is when they split up, the essential oil rises to the top, it'll go into one vat, and the floral waters get kicked out. Floral waters are the more water constituent elements of an essential oil, and you know what they're really good for? They're called hydrosols. What are they good for? Anyone know? Skin. You can't use essential oils on eyes. What if you wake up and you have conjunctivitis? And you could use a hydrosol of rose on a pad, which would be really good. And believe me, we all do really ignorant things even when we know better. And this was years ago. I flew to Ohio, and I was going to do a seminar, and I didn't get in until 3 in the morning, and my eyes were exhausted and tired, and I couldn't see that well, and it looked like I was getting a little conjunctivitis, and I thought, oh, I don't have any hydrosol of rose. Well, maybe if I just put a little bit of water on this cotton pad with just 1 drop of rose, it'll be okay. So, knowing better, all this experience, I went ahead and did it. And I put it on my eye, and I laid there. I thought, oh, this feels heavenly. And all of a sudden, I went, oh, my God, and I got up, and I was screaming. I couldn't see a thing. It went right into the eye. So I rushed right in the bathroom, and I took almond oil, and I put it on a pad. And eventually, I put water on, and it cleansed it out. But if you even look at the majority of bottles with essential oils in many of the stores, they'll say, flush with water if you get into the eye. Well, if you ever get an essential oil into the eye and you flush it with water, it's going to burn your mucous membrane. That's the worst thing to do. So always remember, try to carry a vegetable oil with you, or an almond oil or something like that when you work with essential oils. So anyhow, the hydrosol is the byproduct of the distillation. It's great for skin care. What if somebody has allergic reactions to essential oils? Usually they don't have a problem with the hydrosol, and they still have some of the therapeutic properties. You can use hydrosols on children and on pregnant women. So it's very good to get involved with some of the hydrosols as well. Now, I know what I want to say. When you look at essential oils, therapeutic grade, what does that really mean? How many of you heard, oh yes, this essential oil is 100% pure. It's great, I'm going to use it. How many of you heard that? Do you really even know what's in it? Do you know what pure even means? In clinical aromatherapy terms, all pure means, when somebody says they have 100% pure essential oil, is that it's not cut with a lesser grade essential oil. Meaning if Dean had Lavandula officinalis, lavender oil, and it's at 100% pure, all that means is that his oil wasn't cut with a cheaper Lavandula augustifolia in the next field. That's all that means. It doesn't mean his oil wasn't cut with turpentine or alcohol or vegetable oils. So people need to understand what therapeutic really means. If somebody says, I have a therapeutic grade essential oil, you better make sure it's pure, so it's not cut with a lesser grade oil. It's natural. Natural now tells you it hasn't been cut with the vegetable oils, the alcohol, or whatever. That's what natural means. And complete means that the essential oil has all the lower and higher boiling point constituents in it when it's distilled, so that it has its therapeutic properties. That's why distillation, if you're using an essential oil that's distilled, is critical. It's called extraction methods. Some essential oils are extracted like your citrus oils that are really good for children, and they're antidepressant, but you have to be careful of them, because if you put a citrus oil on, especially bergamot, because it has bergaptine in it, and you go out in the sun, you can get a 3rd-degree burn. And I know people that don't know that, and they come back and they put them on their chakras, and they come back and they have 3rd-degree burns all the way down their body. Now, essential oils can be easy to use. They can be complicated to use. It just depends on what you want to do with them. So complete means it has the lower and higher boiling point constituents from the distillation in the oil. So all 3 of these are one category of therapeutic grade oils. Then you have, after pure, natural, complete, you have genuine, and authentic. And what that is, that's the second category of therapeutic grade oils. That now means that not only do you have a pure, natural, and complete oil, but you also have one that has a gas chromatograph mass spec reading on it, so you can see the chemistry in it, and that it's organic. Because if you're not using oils that are organic, there's going to be a problem. I'd never use those for any kind of aromatherapy on the skin, through the nose, and the French would absolutely never use that internally. How many of you know what's in your oils? Do you know if they're pure, natural, and complete when you use them? Can you tell by the label? We have a real bad labeling process in the United States. Great Britain's very good. They're trying to get a standardized labeling, and so is the United States. They're trying to do that. You should have the specific botanical name on there and a specific chemotype, if it has a certain chemotype to it, which I'll show you in a minute, because essential oils have chemical polymorphism. That means you can be using Ocimum basilicum, which is a basil oil, which is a great antispasmodic, or you could be using another oil that has like melaleucas. There's at least 100 species of melaleuca, and there's at least 600 species of eucalyptus. So if you're going to use a specific eucalyptus for a respiratory condition, but you don't know the specific chemotype to it, you don't know what to do with it. That should be listed on the bottle also if it has a specific chemotype. And then what they're trying to do in the U.S. now is make sure everybody gets a batch number. What if you use an oil and something goes wrong and there was a problem with the batch? You could call up whatever company you're using that has therapeutic grade oils and say, oh, it was batch number 31. I want you to pull that or check it because there's a problem. Because we need to really know what it is that we're using. So when you go to distill an oil, like I said, they can be distilled. They can be extracted with chemicals to make absolutes. You should make sure that you know the difference between a distilled essential oil and one that is an absolute. And then the citrus oils usually have little holes and they're cold pressed. That's how you get your citrus oils. Just looking in distillation alone, people wonder about prices of oils, and we'll get into all the different properties and what they can do for you and how to use them in just a minute. But when you look at this, look how amazing it is. I mean, 250 pounds of eucalyptus will produce basically 1 pound of oil. 1,000 pounds of pine to produce 1 pound of pine oil. 2,000 pounds of cypress, and on. And it takes an extensive amount of rose petals to make a rose oil. And it gets really complicated sometimes because essential oils have specific properties that can become quite confusing. I'm looking for my, there we go. Chemical constituents. These are called functional groups, and we won't go into this much because I don't really want to bore you with this, but these are in your essential oils: alcohols, aldehydes, esters, ethers, ketones, phenols, terpenes, okay? You have two basic groups with essential oils. You have your terpenes, which are monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes, diterpenes. What's so important about that? Well, they know sesquiterpenes cross the blood-brain barrier, that barrier between your skull and the arachnoid and the pia mater and the dura mater, and can get into the brain that way. And they know sesquiterpenes have a great effect on tumors, documented that many of the sesquiterpene oils have anti-tumoral effects, such as frankincense. And then you have terpenoid compounds like these that have the oxygen linked in. Terpenes are carbon-hydrogen, and terpenoids are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen linked into them. So what you're looking at here is that the alcohols can have tonifying, energizing, example, Ravinsara. I won't go through all of these. Aldehydes are usually sedative, esters are usually spasmolytic, ethers balancing, ketones are mucolytic, phenols are stimulating, and terpenes are stimulating. So you know if you go put an oil on you like Rosmarinus officinalis, that's great for capillary stimulation, and also for your brain, for the cerebral cortex if you can't remember things so well, or you're very lethargic. Let's say you want to go out and run and have a good run or work out. You can take Rosmarinus officinalis, rosemary oil, and put it on the bottom of the feet. And they're testing this now with athletic performance, and they found out that athletes are having at least a 15% better performance rate by doing this, and it's legal and it's natural. triad of aromatherapy. And this is very interesting because it's completely different than how we're used to using essential oils. Let's see if, I know that's still a mess, but there, that's my sacred geometry for the day. That's about it. Okay, up here you have the French model. It's a French medical model. They always put themselves up at the apex. That's what Dr. Penawel said. And then over here you have the Germans. Is anybody here French from France? Any Germans from Germany? Okay, over here we have the English model. And in the French model, what you're looking at is they're going to take the oils very aggressively. They call it the Yang model of aromatherapy. And they take it specifically through internal use. And the French say that they're very oral people. They like to take everything internally. And so, food, whatever. So the internal use. You go to France and you have a medical doctor that's trained in phytotherapy, which most of them are. They don't even have naturopaths because so many of their doctors are trained in the natural methodologies. They study years and years and years beyond the regular study to do this, specifically in aromatherapy. And Dr. Danielle Penawel is a leading medical doctor in that arena. And what they do is if you have a serious problem and you go to them, say you have a really bad bacterial problem, somehow it just evolved, it wasn't there before, whether it was a planted bacteria or virus or whether you picked it up from somebody else or it was airborne or whatever, they will go in and they will do a specific aromatogram on you where they will study the specific antibacterial oils in a petri dish and whatever bacteria that they took from you, and they'll see what the inhibition rate or kill ratio is of that oil, and then it's prescribed, and then you're taught how to use it, and so is your family according to the problems and conditions that you have. And so you have to be a medical doctor or a pharmacist to even touch a therapeutic grade oil. And we have therapeutic grade oils here in the US that people are using, and we should be so lucky as long as we know what we're doing, because you have to be an MD or a pharmacist. They'd throw me in jail if I was over there using those oils on you. But it's a very effective method. They work with it. They work with everything, the MDs over there with oils, from cancers through severe depression, through hepatitis A, different viral hepatitis, whatever it is. And theirs is predominantly internal. Now the Germans are a whole nother ballgame. The Germans use the majority of essential oils through olfaction. And that is, and I'll show you some more overheads in a minute, when you're breathing in, you have specific chemicals, those little chemotypes, those molecules that are going up the nose. They're bonding with specific receptors. They will go up into the brain, into the amygdala and the hippocampus. Let me switch this right now so you can see what I'm talking about. And to me, this was really fascinating when I looked at how this occurred through olfaction. The German doctors treat that way predominantly. So you're breathing in the essential oil. It's coming up into the hippocampus and the amygdala, and which is considered your what? Your limbic system. The midbrain, the old brain is the olfactory brain. The, quote, reptilian brain is considered this area right here. When it reaches the hippocampus and the amygdala, you're looking at information that's being analyzed and memory. They say memory trauma is stored there. It's then shunted down to the hypothalamus as you breathe in this scent, which has a little lock and key mechanism. From the hypothalamus, which has anxiety, depression, hormones, etc., it'll then split off either to the thalamus, which encephalin, locus coeruleus for noradrenaline, pituitary, both anterior, posterior pituitary accordingly, and also the raphe nucleus for serotonin. So if you're inhaling something as simple as neroli, or maybe lavender, officinalis, or other specific essential oils, and you can't sleep at night, this is the route it's going to go to get that serotonin release in your body. So this is why the Germans are specifically using essential oils through olfaction, and because they are so extremely potent. Now, did you know in Japan what they're doing to their people, at their workforce there, and they're getting great results? They're actually taking essential oils and they're atomizing it, which means that you can put it in this like atomizer, sort of like a vaporizer that will disperse the oils into the room so that you have negative ions, oxygen, etc., and any property that's in the oil. And they're taking these people in factories as well as their other workforce, and they're starting them off in the morning with essential oils that are very stimulating, like Rosmarinus officinalis and peppermint. They aren't doing cinnamon because it can hurt the mucous membrane. And they're actually putting those oils into the room to get the people to perk up, to wake up. And then after that, according to what they want to do, they're then bringing in floral oils around lunch. People go to lunch, they talk about how bad their jobs are, this or that, so they come back and they will actually have oils in the room to calm them back down, more sedative oils. And then after that, at the end of the day, they will diffuse essential oils like Melaleuca alternifolia or clove to kill all the airborne bacteria, fungus, and viruses that are in the room. And they're using this on a daily basis over in Japan. So this is why olfaction is so critically important. Then you come over and you look at the English technique, which is the British, ourselves, and we're using topical applications. Well, we now know the FDA is letting us use some of it internally. In topical, you have to be careful if you're going to use it neat. How many people know what neat is? Yeah, without diluting it. And usually in the United States and Great Britain, you use a 1 to 5% dilution with a specific essential oil if you're going to put it on topical. So what does that mean? That means that you can take, say someone needs to calm down and they have salvia scalera. They can take 1 drop of that oil and put it in a teaspoon, or you can imagine in your hand what a teaspoon of a vegetable oil would be. And that's a 1%, because a teaspoon holds 100 drops. And then you can just put it on. Usually for pregnant women, elderly, people with skin conditions, all you need is a 1% dilution. More is not better. If you see people slapping them on, this oil here, that oil there, this oil there, there's a problem, because also what they do is it'll affect the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and you're going to have all of this getting shook up in your body, and you might not feel so well. I had a woman that had bought a whole case of oils, and I said, listen, whatever you do, don't go home and smell them all, because she was so excited she wanted to smell everything. She called me up the day after, and she says, she was mad at me. She said, I was up all night long. I said, did you smell those oils? I smelled every single one of them. I took every cap off, and I smelled every single one of them. Well, now that you know how olfaction affects the brain, and it releases those neurotransmitters and chemicals in the body, you can really mess yourself up. And then the next thing she did is I said, whatever you do, how many of you bathe in essential oils? A few of you. It's a wonderful way to not just treat specific conditions, but to relax or for respiratory, because when you put an essential oil into the bathtub, remember, it is not water soluble. What is it going to do? It will go right smack into your skin because it's looking for the fat. So let's say you make a mistake and you go in there and you put a very stimulating caustic oil to the skin, such as cinnamon, which this person did again. And she got in, well, first of all, she put the cinnamon in the tub, and then as she sat down, it went right to her crotch, no doubt. And she was burning severely, had to put oil on it and everything. She called me up. And what you have to do is take that oil, put it in an egg yolk, put it in some liquid lecithin, put it in some kind of a carrier once you're in the tub, and then swish it around so that it can be broken up. You can take an oil like chamomile, German chamomile, and you can put it into the bathtub. It's got a blue nature, and you can see it spread all the way around the tub and around the rings. I missed one thing I wanted to talk about in olfaction, because this was a first-hand study that was really, really exciting. I was doing research at the University of Washington in the Medical Center on effects of essential oils in altering brain states. They've also been used extensively for children with attention deficit, etc. And what I found out was I had a man come to me that was going to be a subject, and of course they couldn't wear any kind of perfumes on their body, and neither could we, and the whole experimental setting was just perfect. And what happened he comes to me and he says, you know, I don't believe in this stuff anyhow. I said, that's okay, that's fine. Just relax, just sit down. We'll study your EEG, see what comes up. And I started off with Cananga odorata, which is ylang-ylang. And it is a very erogenous oil and very stimulating. You know, if you have low libido, you go to ylang-ylang. It smells great too. It's a hypotensive. It's a wonderful oil. It's also antibacterial and antifungal. So you can do all of these things at one time with an essential oil. So he smelled that, and then I came back in the room after a minute and so many epochs, and I looked at him, and he had a smile on his face, and I thought, what's this guy going through? But you can't talk to him unless they're having a problem, like if they stuck cinnamon, which came up next up to their nose and burnt themselves. So then he smelled the cinnamon oil, and then I came back in, and then he looked totally different. The smile was gone. Anyhow, I went through these specific oils, including distilled water. After it was over, I talked to him subjectively about, well, how did you feel about this? He said, what about the first oil? What about Cananga odorata? What about ylang-ylang? How did you feel about that oil? He said to me, well, I think I'd rather talk to Dr. Juan Acosta about it, a man, you know what I mean? I said, no. He said, yeah, I think I'd better talk to Dr. Acosta about this. I said, I'm a researcher, you can tell me, otherwise this isn't any good. He said, well, I've been married to this woman for a long time, and to say the least, you know, my libido's pretty low and I can't really help, he said. And I said, oh, now I'm shocked. Oh, okay, I'm glad I got into this, right? So I said, well, what happened? He said, well, as soon as I started smelling that oil, within about 10 seconds, he said, I started having all these fantasies and feeling all these things. He said, I never wanted to leave the room. And then he had to walk in and give me that cinnamon oil, or whatever that was, which is a very stimulating oil. So this was, and this man himself was a researcher. That's why he didn't believe in the effects of essential oils through olfaction or any other methodology. So that was a real good experience for me to see that, and it's amazing to be able to look at these printout programs and see different parts of the brain changing according to the chemistry of what you're breathing in, because olfaction is critically important. Why do you think you might go out and choose a mate, besides the fact they might look good or you think you have past life with them or whatever? Do you know what's happening on a whole nother level? Who knows? Yes? Close enough. Pheromones. Pheromones, these odorless chemicals that are released from your body, from apocrine glands, from the armpits, down in the crotch area, etc. You're releasing these at all times. And a lot of people will walk into a room and you can't really smell them, and they'll see another person, they'll go, I don't like that person. Maybe it's past life, maybe it's, I don't like their attitude or whatever. It could be their smell, of which you're not even smelling, actually, registering. Because the pheromones are what are so critical, even for relationships. They've done a study, I have books here, all kinds of books with studies that you might want to look at. One of them is called Scent and Psyche, amazing book by Peter and Kate Damian. And they did this study on couples in relationship to their pheromones and what they were picking up, and how they would stay married or get divorced in long range according to the pheromones that were released in the body. So we're looking at something that's very, very important in olfaction, is the relationship of pheromones. Did we look at the vomeronasal system yet? Okay, here we go. So what you see here is you have the vomeronasal organ there, and it's going up, right up into the midbrain. So that's where you're picking up your pheromones. And they said, you know, we don't even have this organ in our body. They used to believe that only animals had it until someone had to do surgery on a soldier who had half his nose blown off, and they found this. And so we are truly picking up these odorless hormones called pheromones. And then you have the vomeronasal nerves. So there's really two routes with olfaction. One straight up, as you see, through the olfactory nerves and up into the midbrain, and the other one from the vomeronasal organ up into the vomeronasal unit, up into the midbrain. This is an aromatogram. Remember me talking about the internal use of the French? This is fascinating. What they've done here, okay, Spanish oregano, Thymus capitis. It's got here is more effective against streptococcus And they did a specific Streptococcus aureus, and they did a vaginal sample. And you can see here, this is what they're doing with aromatograms. And you can see the kill ratio here with the oil in relationship to the Streptococcus that they have taken. And vaginal and rectal are two very good ways, they're called indirect methods of using essential oils, especially for the respiratory system. A lot of asthmatics can't inhale an oil, but you can use them rectally, say with something like a Melaleuca alternifolia or a Pinus sylvestris. But what you have to do is you have to be able to break it down with a carrier oil. Otherwise, you might have more problems than what you started with. So this is the aromatogram. This is what the French use. Okay, then I'd like to show you specifically Melaleuca alternifolia because it is so antibacterial. It's also antifungal and antiviral. And it has a lot of therapeutic actions used internally and externally. This is some of the therapeutic actions of Melaleuca alternifolia. Analgesic, so topically for pain. Antibacterial, antifungal, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, antiparasitic, antipruritic, antiseptic, antiviral, antizygomatic, deodorant, diaphoretic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Expectorant, germicidal, fungicidal. It's an immune stimulant. It'd be a good idea, topically with essential oils, if you even just did a 3% dilution, 3 drops of Melaleuca alternifolia, and a teaspoon of a good cold-pressed vegetable oil, and gave yourself a massage. I do that with my little boy. I do it with myself. My husband uses it. Because when you sit in rooms like this, you know there's quite a bit of bacteria, virus, and fungus in the room. And massage yourself with that because it will go into the bloodstream, into the lymph, which is so critical, because that lymph will get where the blood doesn't. And massage it on yourself. And as you massage, what's important is you're increasing the velocity and decreasing the viscosity of the blood at the same time. And it's getting to all the organs. And essential oils are also eliminated through other specific sites, like Rosmarinus officinalis is eliminated predominantly through the bowel. And others, like garlic. What happens if you rub garlic oil on the feet in 5 minutes? It comes out through your breath. That's how quick they move throughout the body. So to take that Melaleuca alternifolia and be able to just put a topical application on, put maybe 10 drops of it in the bathtub if you want to do a bath with some kind of carrier so that you don't get burnt. Also, at the same time, parasites. We all know, nobody's joking each other, we're full of parasites. And the French, I can't tell you to do this, but I can tell you what the French do is the French will take flaxseed oil, high of the omega-3, 6, and 9s, and they'll put, according to your body size, 1 to 3 drops of Melaleuca alternifolia in a teaspoon of this flax oil 3 times a day for 14 days. They dose for 14 days only. They never go beyond that. That's a recommended daily dose when they are using them internally and have great results with all forms of bacteria, which we know are mutating against penicillins and antibiotics, tetracycline, etc. But they have found out that essential oils, that antibiotics have not mutated at all against essential oils, and neither have viruses. And their chemistries are so complex. Immune stimulant, critical. Okay, asthma, internal, bronchitis, candida, chickenpox, colitis, on and on and on. Whooping cough, lung infections, urinary tract infections, laryngitis. Dr. Danielle Pennewell says as soon as you start feeling that you're getting a sore throat, he just takes not a drop, but just a little touch off the bottle every 5 minutes for the first half an hour. And I touch it to the back of the tongue, just a touch, not a drop, whatever you do. And mix it up with your saliva, whoosh it around, and swallow it. And then you take some with a little carrier oil. If you don't, some of you can use it neat. We do something called neat. That means it's not diluted. And normally you can do something called a skin patch test. Because when I first teach seminars, I don't go out there and just start slapping oils on people because they could have contraindications to that. It might be dermacaustic to them. Maybe they're epileptic and I put eucalyptus on them and they have a problem there. Or maybe they're hypertensive and I put rosemary on them, that's a problem there. Or they're hypotensive on medication and I use something like oregano marjoram oil, which is a great relaxer, great hypotensive. But before I get to know you and I haven't done any clinical worksheet and you don't know what's happening, you should do a skin patch test. You can just take 1 drop of the essential oil, put it in the crook of the arm, hold the arm up like this for 5 minutes and see if you have any burning or irritation or reaction. And you have to make sure you clean it with a vegetable, like some kind of soap that doesn't have any perfumes in it. Or you can do a 24-hour skin patch test that normally they do if you have a blend of oils where you put a bandage over the top. And I know a lot of you don't have time to do that, and it can seem like it's, you know, a real pain, but as long as you know to begin with the spice oils like cinnamon, thyme, oregano, all of those spice oils are highly antiviral, highly antibacterial, that you can use mountain savory. My friend Jeannie was using mountain savory that helped her out tremendously with her gums. But any of those oils, you know right away you have to dilute them, 1 to 5%. Then from that point on, if you're looking at some floral oils that you might put on for a bacterial effect on the skin, usually you don't have to dilute those as much. So it just depends on what it is that you need to do. All right. Now, cinnamon zelanicum. How many of you have used cinnamon oil? Not many of you. Before we do that, here's Melaleuca alternifolia. Here's Melaleuca again. This is specifically alternifolia, which is from the trees. It's a polyvalent, anti-infective, broad-spectrum, antibacterial, both gram-positive and negative, antiviral, antifungal, antiparasitic, especially for candida, whether it's systemic, whether it's in the brain, whether it's in the vagina. Mindy Green, the head of the Herb Research Foundation, especially for women with problems with vaginal candida, took a tampon that was 100% cotton, you know, no rayon or anything in it, did a 5% dilution, which is 5 drops of the Melaleuca alternifolia and a drop of your carrier oil, put it in the tampon, put it in 3 times a day, and people had horrible infections for years. Within days it was gone. And you can do this with other oils as well. All right, cinnamon oil. When you look at a profile of an oil, profiles usually look like this. Okay, they say what family they're from, common names, history, parts used, cultivation, etc. And then they have specific uses. And inhalation of cinnamon is effective for treating coughs and influenza. Externally, bites, childbirthing contractions, colds, cough, gums, etc. You can read up there. Lice, especially with lice, it's really effective. Fungus, toothache, warts. They found out with specific fungal infections and ringworm and etc. To dilute 1% cinnamon oil and put it on topically, because cinnamon is a very dermocaustic oil. If you put it on your skin, it would really burn your skin. But it's a great oil to have. Down here, you're looking at dosages that they use. The French adults, 3 to 4 drops, 3 times a day between meals. But besides flax oil, the French put it also on bucca tablets. They might put it in honey and take it in, etc. All right. Here's some of the therapeutic actions of cinnamon oil: analgesic, antibacterial. It's anti-everything just about, and so is peppermint. Digestive, expectorant, etc. And then it sings, Cinnamomum zelanicum kills typhoid bacillus at a dose of 1 part in 300. This makes cinnamon oil an effective addition to the traveler's first aid kit. And I'll tell you, I'd make sure that I would have cinnamon in my first aid kit. I'd have Melaleuca for basic topical skin infections. I'd have Lavandula officinalis for anything to do with the gut. I'd have Mentha piperita, cinnamon oil. Lemon, which is also very good and antidepressant and has been used with children extensively, is also antibacterial, antiparasitic, etc. If you get a lemon oil, you have to make sure that that is organic because of all the pesticides that go into the peels. And that's one thing that I really upsets me, is that you can have a wonderful organic farm And you can have the pesticides and everything blow over from the other one and still cause problems on your crop. And essential oils and plants, they are live substances. These oils are made in hair cells and ducts and seeds. And when I started really getting into it, I saw the relationship between our body and their bodies. And I realized we've been going on for so many years without bringing such a wonderful therapy into our lives that even though I might have made it look complicated in my seminar, I'll make it look a lot simple because of the time element up here. I'm trying to get a lot out in a short amount of time. But to be able to carry a neroli oil and to inhale that, you know, when you're getting stressed and you're sitting in a car in a, you know, some kind of a traffic jam and having problems, you can just inhale that oil simply. Essential oils, when I was in Turkey, I went to different fields, and different oils, different plants would grow differently according to the plant that was next to them. Their chemistry would change just like a good or a bad neighbor. That's how they feel about one another. We had Thymus vulgaris, and one crop was totally different from the other crop and its chemistry because the one crop was growing next to lavender. Okay. I didn't show you this earlier, but when you're looking at an analysis sheet of essential oils, this is a gas chromatograph mass spec reading. I can't get that on there right. Anyhow, I'll just show you that. There's 200 to 800 chemical constituents in every single oil, and we can't even measure them all. And every one of those constituents have health benefits to us. All we have to do is learn how to use them properly, whether it's topical, internal, we can say now with the FDA because they're considered, you know, certain ones for food supplementation, or through olfaction. Jane Buckle's using them extensively in the hospitals. She has an 8-year degree in essential oils, and she came to the United States. She has a great book called Clinical Aromatherapy in Nursing. If you want any documentation, you want to know how to use them properly, go to that book, Jane Buckle, Clinical Aromatherapy in Nursing. And she's talking about how in the hospitals, they're getting up to 50% of the people going out with infections that they didn't have when they came in. And she said that when you were in the operating room, many of the infections came from the circulating the same air over and over again in the operating room. And so now they're working with Melaleuca alternifolia and Eugenia caryophyllata clove oil. And what they're doing is they are just simply atomizing it into the air, and they're having great results with people that are in hospitals, but they have a huge protocol that they have to follow before they'll be able to generalize that. So my time is up. I can't rattle on much more, but I want to thank you very much. And if you come to the seminar that I'm doing, I will give you a lot more information on specific formulas that are used for specific conditions, what you can do, how you can use it. And just one last thing is I am the international organizer for the Phytomedical Conference that's over in France. I do have some free brochures on that if anybody wants to go to the French Riviera and learn some more from the doctors. That's it.